What if I told you that 3 foods you may be eating almost every day could be helping create the exact biological conditions cancer cells want? More inflammation, more DNA damage, more insulin signaling, and a friendlier blood supply. Dr. William Li has helped bring this idea into the mainstream through the lens of food as medicine. And in the next 25 minutes, I want to walk you through the research in plain English so you can see exactly how this works inside your body. Stay with me, because at the end I'm going to show you one everyday kitchen ingredient backed by research from Harvard and Spain that may help shift this biology back in your favor. To understand this, you need to know something extraordinary about your body. Right now, at this very moment, your body is replacing cells, repairing tissues, surveying for threats, and constantly deciding which cells live, which cells die, and which cells need to be removed before they become dangerous. Cancer doesn't appear out of nowhere in a single dramatic moment. It develops over time when damaged cells escape the checkpoints that are designed to control them. What you eat does not act like an on-off switch, and no single meal causes cancer. But the food you eat repeatedly can influence the terrain inside your body. It can either strengthen your natural defenses or weaken them. This is where the science becomes so fascinating. The World Health Organization states that between 30 and 50% of all cancer cases are preventable. That is a stunning number. It tells you that while genetics matter, biology is not destiny. It also tells you that the environment you create inside your body every day matters enormously. Food is part of that environment. Your bloodstream is part of that environment. Your gut microbiome is part of that environment. Your immune system is part of that environment. And when those systems are pushed in the wrong direction day after day, year after year, cancer cells may find more opportunities to grow. One useful way to think about this is through the body's built-in defense systems. You have mechanisms that regulate angiogenesis, the growth of new blood vessels. You have regeneration, which helps renew healthy tissue. You have a microbiome made up of trillions of microbes that help control inflammation and metabolism. You have DNA protection and repair mechanisms working around the clock. And you have immune defenses that can recognize and eliminate abnormal cells. The research over the last decade has shown us that foods can influence every one of these systems. That is why food is not just fuel, it is biological information. Now this is where I want you to pay close attention. When we talk about foods that may fuel cancer cell growth, we are not saying that cancer cells are literally sitting there eating a slice of bacon or sipping wine through a straw. What we mean is that certain foods can create a pro-cancer environment. They may raise inflammation, they may generate carcinogenic compounds, they may damage the gut barrier, they may increase obesity and insulin resistance, they may interfere with the microbiome, they may push hormones and growth factors in a direction that abnormal cells can exploit, and once that environment is established, cancer cells can use it. Let me share with you what the evidence is showing. In 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, published its evaluation in The Lancet Oncology and classified processed meat as carcinogenic to humans. The experts concluded that each 50-gram portion of processed meat eaten daily increases the risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. That is not a fringe opinion. That is one of the world's leading cancer authorities looking at more than 800 studies. The World Cancer Research Fund has echoed this message, recommending that processed meat be avoided because of its strong link to bowel cancer. Then there is alcohol, and this is one area where the evidence has become increasingly difficult to ignore. The National Cancer Institute states that alcohol is causally linked to cancers of the mouth, throat, voice box, esophagus, liver, breast, and colorectal. Here's the part that surprises many people. The increased risk does not begin only with heavy drinking. The NCI makes it clear that even light drinkers can have an elevated risk for some cancers, particularly breast cancer. In other words, the biology starts shifting earlier than many people realize. The third category is ultra-processed foods. A landmark 2018 study in the BMJ from the French Nutrinet Santé cohort followed more than 100,000 adults and found that each 10% increase in the proportion of ultra-processed foods in the diet was associated with a 12% increase in overall cancer risk and an 11% increase in breast cancer risk. And this is not just one study. A 2024 meta-analysis in the American Journal of Gastroenterology involving more than 1.1 million participants found that the highest ultra-processed food consumption was associated with an 11% higher risk of colorectal cancer, a 12% higher risk of colon cancer, and a 43% higher risk of non-cardiac stomach cancer. So what are these 3 everyday cancer-fueling foods or food patterns? Number 1 is processed meat: bacon, sausage, deli meat, hot dogs, pepperoni, ham, salami, and many packaged luncheon meats, even some made from chicken or turkey. Number 2 is ultra-processed packaged food: sugary breakfast products, packaged snack cakes, industrial breads, chips, sweetened yogurts with additives, ready-to-eat desserts, flavored drinks, and heavily formulated convenience foods. Number 3 is alcohol, including that routine nightly drink that many people assume is harmless simply because it has become normalized. Let me explain the biology, because this is where the science becomes truly extraordinary. Start with processed meat. These foods are often preserved with nitrites and nitrates. In the body, and especially in the digestive tract, these compounds can contribute to the formation of N-nitroso compounds, many of which are carcinogenic. Processed meats can also contain heme iron, which can catalyze reactions that produce oxidative stress and damage the lining of the bowel. Add high-heat cooking into the picture, and you can generate heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, compounds that have been studied for their mutagenic effects. What matters here is not one sandwich. It is repetition. When your colon is repeatedly exposed to inflammatory stress, oxidative compounds, and DNA-damaging byproducts, the cells lining the gut have to work harder to repair themselves. Every time cells divide, there is a chance for error. Your body has elegant repair systems, but when the burden keeps rising, the opportunity for damage to slip through those defenses also rises. This is one of the reasons colorectal cancer is so tightly linked to dietary patterns. But here's where the science gets even more interesting. Processed meat doesn't just affect DNA directly, it also works through the terrain of the microbiome and inflammation. A low-fiber, high-processed meat eating pattern tends to displace the kinds of whole plant foods that feed beneficial gut bacteria. That matters because your gut microbes turn dietary fiber into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate is remarkable. It helps nourish the cells lining the colon, supports barrier integrity, and has anti-inflammatory effects. When fiber goes down and processed foods go up, you lose some of that protection. In other words, you are not just adding risk, you may also be removing defense. Now let's move to ultra-processed foods, because this is one of the most important and underappreciated areas of nutrition science right now. Ultra-processed foods are not simply foods that have been cooked or frozen. They are industrial formulations, often made with refined starches, added sugars, damaged fats, flavorings, colorings, stabilizers, emulsifiers, and ingredients you would never use in your own kitchen. And what the research is showing is that these products may do harm through multiple pathways at once. First, they are often calorie-dense and easy to overconsume, which can drive weight gain and metabolic dysfunction. Excess body fat is not passive. Adipose tissue is biologically active. It releases inflammatory mediators, alters hormone levels, and can increase insulin resistance. Higher insulin levels and higher IGF-1 signaling create a growth-promoting environment that abnormal cells may exploit. This is one of the ways food can affect cancer biology without containing a classic carcinogen. It shifts the growth signals in your body. Second, ultra-processed foods are usually stripped of fiber and rich in rapidly absorbable carbohydrates. That means sharper glucose excursions, more insulin demand, and more metabolic stress over time. Again, the issue is not one cookie. The issue is the repeated pattern. If breakfast, lunch, snacks, and dessert are all built around refined, ultra-processed products, you are bathing your metabolism in signals that push toward inflammation and away from resilience. Third, and this is especially compelling, some ultra-processed foods contain additives that may directly disturb the gut ecosystem. In 2017, a paper in Cancer Research from the American Association for Cancer Research showed that common dietary emulsifiers, specifically carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80, promoted low-grade inflammation and colon carcinogenesis in mice by altering the microbiota. The altered microbes produced more pro-inflammatory signals like lipopolysaccharide and flagellin, and these changes were sufficient to drive tumor-promoting pathways. Now, animal research is not the same as human clinical proof, and we should always be careful about that. But when you put this mechanistic work together with the human population data linking ultra-processed foods to colorectal and stomach cancer risk, the picture becomes much more coherent. Here's what fascinates me about this. The gut is not just a digestive tube, it is an immune organ, a metabolic organ, and a communication hub. Your microbiome helps train your immune system, maintain the mucus barrier that protects the intestinal wall, and regulate inflammation. When that ecosystem is damaged, the barrier becomes less effective, inflammatory molecules can rise, and the local environment becomes more chaotic. Cancer cells thrive in chaos. Healthy tissues prefer stability. Now let's talk about alcohol, because this is a place where the biology is both simple and sobering. When you drink alcohol, your body metabolizes ethanol into acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is toxic. It can damage DNA and interfere with the way cells repair that damage. Alcohol can also increase oxidative stress, impair nutrient absorption, promote inflammation, and in some contexts raise estrogen levels, which helps explain part of its relationship with breast cancer. That is why the National Cancer Institute and the World Health Organization are so clear that alcohol is a Group 1 carcinogen. What the science reveals is truly extraordinary in a troubling way. A substance can be culturally normal, widely marketed, associated with relaxation, and still be biologically disruptive. That's an important distinction. Something being socially accepted does not make it physiologically neutral. And if you are someone who thinks, but I only drink a little, this is where the nuance matters. The NCI specifically notes that even light drinking can increase risk for some cancers. That does not mean everyone who drinks will develop cancer. It means the biology moves in the wrong direction, even at relatively modest levels. And this connects to something even more remarkable. Cancer cells cannot grow beyond a tiny size unless they recruit a blood supply, a process called angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is normal and necessary in healing, but tumors hijack it. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and metabolic dysfunction can all increase pro-angiogenic signals such as VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. So when your diet repeatedly drives inflammation and tissue stress, you may be making it easier for abnormal cells not only to survive, but also to build the infrastructure they need to expand. That is why food as medicine is not about magical thinking. It is about modifying the biological environment in which disease either advances or struggles. And here's the beautiful part. The same science that identifies risk also points to solutions. You do not have to become perfect. You do not need exotic powders or miracle supplements. What you need is a strategy that weakens the foods that feed the problem and strengthens the foods that support your defenses. So based on this research, here are the 3 foods I want you to focus on instead. The first is cruciferous vegetables, especially broccoli, broccoli sprouts, watercress, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage. These foods contain glucosinolates that can be converted into a compound called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is one of the most exciting bioactives in food science because it activates a master defense pathway known as NRF2. Let me take you one layer deeper. Under ordinary conditions, a protein called KEAP1 keeps NRF2 under tight control and targets it for breakdown. Sulforaphane modifies KEAP1, allowing NRF2 to move into the nucleus of the cell and switch on genes involved in detoxification, antioxidant defense, and cellular protection. A Johns Hopkins review on sulforaphane and NRF2 described this pathway as a major target for cancer prevention. The review also noted that sulforaphane has been shown to induce apoptosis, inhibit cell cycle progression, and inhibit angiogenesis in experimental settings. In other words, this compound helps your cells defend themselves. And there is human evidence here too. In a Johns Hopkins and cancer prevention research study, people infected with Helicobacter pylori consumed broccoli sprouts for 8 weeks and showed reductions in biomarkers of H. pylori colonization and gastric inflammation. Why does that matter? Because H. pylori is strongly linked to stomach cancer. So now you can see the elegance of this biology. A food does not have to behave like a drug to be powerful. It can strengthen host defenses, improve the local tissue environment, and reduce a cancer-related biological burden. For maximum benefit, think food first. Lightly steaming broccoli for a few minutes preserves much of its beneficial chemistry better than boiling it to softness. Chopping cruciferous vegetables and letting them rest briefly before cooking can also help the conversion of precursor compounds. And if you are using cooked crucifers, pairing them with a little mustard, radish, or arugula can help restore the enzyme activity that forms sulforaphane. This is one of those small kitchen habits that may have outsized biological consequences over time. The second food group I want you to focus on is fermented foods, especially plain yogurt with live cultures, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and traditionally fermented vegetables. Here's why. If ultra-processed foods and additives may damage the microbiome, then rebuilding that ecosystem becomes part of the solution. In 2021, a Stanford study published in Cell randomly assigned healthy adults to a high-fiber or high-fermented food diet. The high-fermented food group steadily increased microbiome diversity and decreased multiple inflammatory markers. 19 inflammatory proteins went down, including interleukin-6, a marker closely tied to chronic inflammation. That finding is remarkable because low microbial diversity is often associated with poorer metabolic and immune resilience. A more diverse microbiome is generally a more adaptable microbiome. Fermented foods appear to help remodel the gut ecosystem in a beneficial direction, not just by delivering microbes, but by influencing the community that already lives inside you. This matters for cancer biology because immune surveillance, barrier integrity, and inflammatory tone all depend in part on what is happening in your gut. Now, this is where I want you to be practical. You do not need to make your kitchen look like a fermentation laboratory. A spoonful of sauerkraut with lunch, a serving of plain yogurt with berries, or a glass of kefir with breakfast can be enough to begin shifting the pattern. What matters most is consistency and choosing products that are minimally processed and lower in added sugar. If you buy yogurt that is essentially a dessert, you defeat part of the purpose. You want the fermentation, not the candy coating. The third food I want you to bring in is mushrooms, especially shiitake, maitake, and oyster mushrooms. Mushrooms contain unique bioactives, including beta-glucans and ergothioneine, that may support immune health and reduce oxidative stress. A 2021 systematic review and meta-analysis in Advances in Nutrition found that higher mushroom consumption was associated with a lower risk of total cancer, with a pooled relative risk of 0.66, comparing highest with lowest intake, and there was evidence of a nonlinear dose-response relationship. The association was particularly notable for breast cancer. Here's why mushrooms are so interesting. Beta-glucans can interact with immune cells and help modulate immune activity. Ergothioneine is an unusual antioxidant amino acid concentrated in mushrooms that may help protect tissues from oxidative damage. Again, this does not mean mushrooms are a cure. It means they may help support immune balance and cellular protection in a way that is consistent with healthier tissue biology. Sauté them with onions, add them to soups, roast them, or use them to replace part of the meat in a dish. This is one of the easiest swaps you can make if you are trying to reduce processed or red meat without feeling deprived. Now, I promised you a breakthrough, and here it is. If there is one everyday kitchen ingredient that beautifully illustrates how food can shift the biology away from cancer-fueling patterns, it is extra virgin olive oil. This is not because olive oil is trendy. It is because the evidence is unusually compelling. In 2022, a Harvard-led analysis published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that consuming more than half a tablespoon of olive oil per day was associated with a 16% lower risk of cancer mortality compared with none. The same study found that replacing margarine, butter, mayonnaise, and dairy fat with olive oil was associated with lower mortality risk. And if you want randomized trial data, the PREDIM study published in JAMA Internal Medicine found that women assigned to a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil had a 62% lower relative risk of malignant breast cancer compared with a control diet. That is one of the most striking food-based cancer prevention findings we have from a long-term randomized dietary intervention. So what makes extra virgin olive oil so special? It contains monounsaturated fat, yes, but it also contains polyphenols, including compounds such as hydroxytyrosol and oleocanthal, which have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. When you use extra virgin olive oil in place of more processed fats, you are not simply subtracting harm. You are adding bioactive support. You are changing the lipid environment, the inflammatory environment, and likely the vascular environment as well. And that is why this one ingredient is such a powerful example of food as medicine. If you want to put all of this together into one simple anti-cancer plate, here is a practical framework. Remove or sharply reduce the daily processed meats. Replace them with beans, lentils, mushrooms, fish, tofu, or minimally processed poultry if you eat animal foods. Pull back on ultra-processed packaged products and rebuild meals around real food, vegetables, legumes, intact whole grains, nuts, seeds, fruit, and fermented foods. Treat alcohol with more caution than the culture teaches you to. If you choose to drink, understand that less is biologically better. Then bring in the defenders: cruciferous vegetables, fermented foods, mushrooms, berries, extra virgin olive oil, and other whole plant foods rich in polyphenols and fiber. What I find most compelling is that these choices work across multiple defense systems at once. Cruciferous vegetables support detoxification and DNA protection. Fermented foods support the microbiome and immune balance. Mushrooms may support immune surveillance. Extra virgin olive oil helps quiet inflammation and supports healthier metabolic signaling. And all of these foods fit naturally into everyday life. They are not pills. They are not hacks. They are not acts of deprivation. They are simply choices that align your kitchen with your biology. And let me say something important with complete clarity. If you already have cancer, food should not be seen as a replacement for medical treatment. And if you have risk factors, symptoms, or a diagnosis, talk with your own physician and oncology team. But that does not reduce the importance of this science. If anything, it heightens it, because whether you are trying to prevent cancer, reduce recurrence risk, or simply support better long-term health, the terrain inside your body matters. This is one of the most exciting areas of medicine right now because it puts real power back in your hands. Every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner is a chance to send signals into your bloodstream, your gut, your immune system, and your tissues. Some signals promote repair, some promote resilience, some promote inflammation and vulnerability, and over years, those signals add up. So, if you remember only one thing from this video, remember this. Cancer grows best in a body environment that has become permissive to it. Processed meat, ultra-processed foods, and alcohol can all help create that permissive environment. Cruciferous vegetables, fermented foods, mushrooms, and extra virgin olive oil may help move the biology in the opposite direction. That is the real meaning of food as medicine. It is not fantasy. It is biological leverage. If this was helpful, share it with someone you care about, because the science of how food influences cancer risk is one of the most important public health conversations of our time. And if you want to go deeper into how angiogenesis, the microbiome, and DNA protection respond to what you eat, keep exploring this topic, because the research is moving fast, and it is changing the way we think about prevention. Your body has an extraordinary capacity to defend and repair itself when you give it the right tools, and one of the most powerful places to begin is your next meal.